Okay, well, here we are. Um, this week we read in our Devi book, chapter 23 to 26. And so we're going to cover particularly the part of Mahisar. I think the last chapter or so started on Shumba and Nishumba, but we'll continue with that on our next time. So chapter 23 was when one of Mahisasura's general went to fight, and both Chikasura and Tamra were slain by the Divine Mother. And of course, Mahasura got very upset. Even some tears came into his eyes. So he sent two of his most wise asuras, laden with all sorts of treasures, to the Devi to try to win her over so that she would be Mahasura's wife. So they talked to her for a minute or two, and then the second to the bottom paragraph, she returns their conversation, says, "Demon, I am only a witness in this world. I have no desire, and I am eternally free. I have no enmity with anyone, but when great evil rears its head, I must crush it, or the world would be plunged in darkness. And where will the good find refuge then? I have come to restore Dharma. Demon, for your evil master means to extinguish it forever. The Devas and the Trimurti preserve the worlds, and they too are born again and again and keep Dharma alive. But your king has a boon that only a woman can kill him. And who else shall that woman be but me? Your king is an enemy of Dharma, Asura, and I mean to have his head. He sits upon a lofty throne, far from his proper station in life, and darkness sweeps the three realms. He abuses the boon he has. If you truly want peace, I will give Mahesura another chance. Let him abandon Devaloka and return to Patala, where he belongs, where the noble Prahlad dwells. Asiloma, who was a very wise demon, turned to his comrade, Vidalaka. Demon, you have heard what she says. What shall we do now? So they're actually listening to him. These are wiser demons. Vidalakya, who was a scholar of the Shastra, said, our Lord Mahisa knows that he will die if he meets this Devi in battle. Yet he is so full of arrogance that he prefers death to doing what she asks, which after all is only just. Our king saw how Durmukha, Vaskala, Chikasura, and Tamra perished, and their legions with them. He heard how easily she slew those demons who have by themselves put armies to rout. Still, he did not hesitate to send us to confront the terrible Devi, to send us to our deaths. We are like puppets, my friend, and the puppet master holds our lives in his hands. Mahisa has already heard the Devi's message to him 3 times. If he meant to do as she says, he would already have abandoned Devaloka and gone back down to Patala, which my blood longs for. But he does not mean to strike peace with her, Asaloma. I fear our master has chosen to die, and if death were a bewitching woman, as if death was a bewitching woman in whose arms he means to live forever. Mahisha will not be pleased to hear the same message from the Devi again. It is best we fight her and even die ourselves rather than return to him with her haughty words. Asilama could not argue with what his friend said. So both of those Asuras donned their weapons and armor and mounted their chariots in readiness for battle. Though they were learned and refined demons, they were also ferocious and warriors as well. The wise Dinava said humbly to the Devi, my master Mahisa could never tell what was true from what was pleasant, but I dare not tell him this. Why, I would rather give up my life to you, Devi, so fight. So they fight and they both get killed. But I thought that was an interesting conversations between the two of them. And so then finally, after they get killed as well, then Mahisa heard the news and he decided it was time for him to take the field. So many of his generals have died. And at first he knew that coming to Buffalo, she may not be so interested in him for being a husband. So he made himself into an extremely handsome man, so handsome that all the women in his court were just knocked over with his beauty. But when he met the Devi, he was odd and he was pretty, yeah. And once again, he tried to make sweet talk with her. And this is on page 122, the second paragraph. But she threw her perfect head and laughed. Gross demon, I had not the faintest interest in pleasure, for I have eternal bliss, and what pleasure can compare with that? As for a man, the supreme Purusha is my lord. How can I want any other, let alone you? Mahisa, seek your peace, for only peace will give you the joy you are seeking. Woman is bondage. She can only bring torment to your life. So finally, so then Mahisa keeps trying to convince her. So he's this beautiful looking man. And he goes on to say, if you don't change your mind and, take me as your husband, you'll regret it like Mandodari. Do you remember that story? Some people heard. So Mandodari was the eldest daughter of a king, and she was beautiful. And the king wanted to marry her off at the proper time and had a very wonderful prince in mind, but she said no. And then a little later, she was out in the forest, and another king, the young king of Ayodhya, happened to get lost and was in that same forest and saw her. And he fell in love with her because she was so beautiful. And so he asked her servant, could you find out, tell her that who I am and see if she would be willing to marry me, tell her that I have fallen in love with her. Anyway, so she rebuked him also and was very rude. And so it was. So she had no marriage at that time. Well, then 2 years later, because her line is she wants to be a sannyasin. She wants to never have a husband or anything like that. So 2 years later, her younger sister is time for her to get married, and the king calls us Swayambara. That's where calls all the princes and kings that would like to have a wife. And the young princess gets to choose who. And so that happened. But it so happened at the Swayambara that our sannyasi, Mandodari, sees a prince and she falls in love with him, just like totally. Even though, yeah. even though in here it describes him as having shifty eyes and a nose that's rather too big for his face. Off she goes. So this is Mahisora's point, that if you don't marry the husband that's there for you, then something terrible might happen. And indeed it did. So the younger sister has a nice husband and they get married, and Mandodari asks her father, says, please marry me to him, this man as well. And so for about a month it was wonderful. And then after a month, his hanky panky, I guess it said he was so expert in bed, but she was so naive, she didn't even think about where he might have learned that. She assumed he was also a virgin like she was. So anyway, so then he has one maid servant, and he squeezes out of it by saying, oh, she attacked me. But then she finds him in her bed when she was supposed to be doing her puja. She came back for incense, and there he was. And so then the rest, she never spoke to him again, never slept with him, of course, again. But she realized she couldn't go home, and she couldn't, all she could see is this beautiful prince that she met in the forest that she wished she had said yes to. But in the meantime, she gets to live a life by herself as a sannyasi in the home of the husband that she's not fond of. So anyway, so he says, so this will be your fate, Devi, if you don't marry me. So you better marry me or you'll turn out like Mandodari. But here on page 128, 4 paragraphs down, it says, but she was unmoved. With the strangest smile, she said, go down into Patala or prepare to fight me. I see you are a great fool, a greater fool than I thought, that you dare compare me with this Mandodari. Do you even know who I am, demon? I am the mother of the heaven and earth. I am the formless Parashakti. You see me like this because I have come to establish Dharma in the worlds, the Dharma that you seek to destroy. Demon, I have come to kill you. So, you son of a buffalo, let us have done with words. Come, bite me now. And she spoke with such a sharp tongue that it actually finally made Mahesura realize that she was actually telling the truth, and got very angry and started fighting. So as they're fighting, he starts changing forms. He changed from a man to a buffalo during the fight. And as she was attacking him and possibly going to kill him as a buffalo, he quickly changed to a lion. And then she was fighting the lion. And then as she was getting closer to killing him in that form, he turned into an elephant by his Maya magic. And then finally he turned back to a buffalo again, at which point she was able to kill him. But this is beautiful as they're in the fight, and this is page 130, and it's 5 paragraphs down. She roars first at him, I mean to end the Deva's fear today. I will parch your foolish head from your ugly body. A little more wine for me, then the earth shall drink your blood. She drank again deeply from her golden cup, and her eyes rolled now. Then she set her beast at Mahisa, and for the first time, she became the aggressor. She flew at that Asura. The sky was full of divine voices crying encouragement so that the Devi, to the Devi, Dundobis and berries and turiyas echoed all around. Bright petals fell from the goddesses, and all the field was steeped in this sense of heaven, and Jaya cried out to everything, which means victory. But I point that out because when we're referring to the Chandipat after this, he points that out a little bit more too. So the bottom line is he's killed, and then all the devas took up the task of establishing Dharma on earth again. Indeed, by the goddess's grace, and after the death of Mahisa, their mission was now not hard, for Dharma is natural to creation, and it subsides only when some great evil obscures it. This is on 132. We're going to go to the second to last paragraph. And all men lived in Dharma, in harmony with the world and themselves, and fulfilling their natural tasks. Most of all, the godlessness that had raised its head darkly in men's heart vanished, as if it had been a nightmare from which humankind had now awoken. The Vedas were sung, the Sastras studied, and the fires of yagyas lit homes and ashrams. Worship was the way once more, and it rendered life ambrosial. It was again a time when it was more natural and easier to love your fellow man than hate him. There were no more wars in the world. Men were honest and satisfied with what they had. Envy and covetousness left their hearts, and if they had never dwelt there at all, as if they had never dwelt there at all. And so it just talks about how, I love that, so that's the natural tendency of people when there's not this evil around. So that's the end of that chapter. And then when chapter 25, like I said, goes into two new demons, Nishumba and Sumba, and we'll continue reading about them. But I'm going to turn over to our Devi, our Chandipat. If you have that, we're going to read this part. So we read some of it last time about Chikasura and the different ones. So we're going to start on page 164 of the Chandipat by Swami Satchidananda Saraswati. When the great thoughts thus saw their forces being destroyed, that heroic general, devoid of clear understanding, in great anger, proceeded to battle with the mother of the universe. I'm on the right chapter. Let's make sure. Okay, that's right. That thought rained upon the goddess a cloud of the arrows of various doubts, as plentiful as the waters that fall from a cloud upon Mount Meru. So he's devoid of clear understanding. He has a lot of doubts. Oh, is this the right mantra to do? Or is this the right guru to follow? Then the goddess fired such a multitude of arrows that cut his arrows into pieces, and also killed his horse and his charioteer. With this, she also cut his bow and his exceedingly high banner. After cutting his bow, she pierced his body with her arrows. Losing his bow, chariot, horses, and charioteer, that thought took up his sword and shield and ran after the goddess. With the sharp edge of his sword, he struck the lion on the head, and with great speed, he gave a blow to the goddess on her left arm. When that sword touched her body, it broke into pieces, and that angry thought of many considerations took a pike in his hand. And that great thought threw that glaring pike at the excellent one beyond time, the Divine Mother, just as the sun fills the heavens with dazzling luster. When the goddess saw the pike coming at her, She too let loose her pike, which split his weapon into numerous pieces, and devoid of clear understanding, gave up his life. After the death of that valiant general in the army of the great ego Maheswara, devoid of clear understanding, who had been the source of afflictions to many gods, fickleness approached, mounted on his elephant. He attacked the goddess from above with his energy, but the mother of the universe, with the shout of her mantra, wounded him and deprived of light. The energy fell to the earth. When he found that his enemy's energy was broken, fickleness became intensely angry. Now he threw his pike at the divine mother, but the goddess cut it with her arrows. In all of this, the lion and the goddess jumped upon the head of the elephant and began intense battle with that thought. Those two fought, and the elephant fell to the ground. Then they rose in excessive rage and began to fight again with fiercer blows. Thereafter, with great speed, the lion leaped into the atmosphere, and falling from the sky, severed the head of fickleness from his body. Haughtiness was slain by the goddess with stones and trees in the battlefield, and striking with his paws and biting with his teeth, the lion brought down disbelief. Striking angrily with her club, the goddess reduced arrogance to powder. Memories was cut by the sword, and anxiety and blindness by her arrows. Violent temper and passion, and the great deceiver too, were slain by the three-eyed seer of all, the divine mother. Hypocrisy's head was cut by the sword, and irresistible temptation and foul mouth were both sent to the kingdom of death by her arrows. Seeing his army thus being destroyed, the great ego, Maheswara, assumed the form of a buffalo, and he himself began to terrify the troops of the goddess. Sometimes he fought with his snout, sometimes kicking with his hoofs into the air, sometimes hitting with his tail, sometimes whirling around while ripping with his horns. With great speed and a great war cry, his breath puffing in exertion, he scattered the troops over the ground. Having laid low the troops of her army, that thought advanced to kill the lion of the goddess. Then the mother of the universe became angry. That great evil one, the great ego, Maheswara, also became very angry. He kicked the earth with his hoofs and raised large mountains with his horns and threw them aside as he roared. With the great speed of this thought, the earth split in fear. His tail lashed the sea of desire, causing the water to flood the earth. Tossing about his horns, he dashed and split the clouds to pieces, and cast by the violent speed of his breath winds, mountains fell from the sky. And waging battle in the great anger, the great thought advanced towards her, while she who tears apart thought, the divine mother, assumed anger and prepared to slay him. Throwing her net, she bound that great thought. After being bound in the great encounter, he left his form as a buffalo. Thereafter, he manifested in the form of a lion. In this condition, the mother of the universe was prepared to cut off his head, but somehow he changed his form again to that of a man bearing a sword. Then the goddess instantly rained upon him a shower of arrows, and with sword and shield, she was ready to pierce him Just then he took the form of the king of elephants. With his trunk, he began to pull the huge lion of the goddess and to roar. But as he was pulling, she cut the trunk with her sword. Then that great thought again wore the body of a buffalo, and in the manner as before, with the inhalation and exhalation of his breath, he shook the three worlds with all the moves and moves not. In great rage, the mother of the perceptible world, she who tears apart thought, again and again drank an excellent spirit, and with red eyes began to laugh. There in the strength and boldness of that wild ecstasy, that evil demon roared with his horns through a mountain that she who tears apart thought. She began to pulverize those mountains with her arrows of speech, speaking in the ecstasy of spirit. Her mouth became red and her tongue was stuttering. Roar and roar, you fool. For so long as I drink this spirit, roar so much as you like. Your death is in my hands, and when I have finished drinking, soon the gods will be roaring. Thus speaking, the goddess leaped and ascended above that great thought, pressing down upon him and holding him with her foot. She struck him in the throat with her pike. The great ego, again hit by the foot of the goddess, changed his form from his mouth, but was able to free only half of his body. And with her great strength, the goddess restrained that as well. Even with the half of his body coming out, the great thought waged battle with the goddess. Then the goddess cut off his head with a great double-edged sword. Shrieking and crying, the remaining thoughts of that army ran away, and all the gods became exceedingly joyous. In great satisfaction, the gods joined the great seers in hymns of praise to the goddess, while the celestial chorus and nymphs sang and danced with joy. So chapter 4 goes on with praising. So after the death of that excessively forceful and evil thought, the great ego, Mahisasura, and the destruction of his army of perturbances by the hand of the divine goddess, the rule of the pure, along with all the other divine gods, with their heads bowed in reverence, began to sing hymns of praise to the Supreme Empress. Their beautiful bodies were filled with excessive delight and pleasurable excitement. Her intrinsic nature is the aggregate energy of all the gods. With her energy, she pervades the entire universe. She is the most highly regarded by all the gods and seers of sacred wisdom. To the Mother of the universe, with the greatest intensity of devotion, we give reverence unto her. May she grant us our welfare. So then, with whose incomparable greatness and strength, the Lord of the universe, who creates, preserves, and dissolves the creation, is incapable to extol. May that Supreme Empress, she who tears apart thought, think to protect the entire gross world and destroy fear and impurity. She is the goddess of true wealth, intelligence, and goes on talking about how beautiful and powerful she is. And then it's quite beautiful. Page 183, we're at. By your grace, O goddess, The meritorious souls perform every day all of these actions of spiritual discipline and righteous conduct with the greatest of faith and devotion, and thereby attain to heavenly perceptions. Are you not therefore the grantor of all fruits in the three worlds, a reliever of difficulties, remembering you, the fear of all living beings is dispelled. When remembering by those individuals in the harmony of spiritual growth, you increase their welfare and intelligence. Who is like you, O dispeller of poverty, pain, and fear, whose sympathetic demeanor always extends compassionate assistance to everyone? Out there. So here on page 188, it says, thus the gods sang praise to the creator of the perceivable universe and worshiped her with flowers and perfume and other items of the garden of delight. When all united in the fullest heavenly devotion and offered incense, fragrances, and food, then they all bowed to the goddess in obeisance, and in secret and serene countenance, she spoke to them. The goddess said, I will grant you the fulfillment of your desire. The god said, the Supreme Empress has fulfilled our every desire, and there is nothing that remains undone. Our enemy, the great ego, has been slain, O great seer of all. Beyond that, you desire to grant us a boon? Then whenever we will remember you, then and there you will give us intuitive vision and remove our greatest distress. And, O Mother of the Universe, whatever humans praise you with these, whenever they praise you with these verses, may you increase their knowledge, prosperity, and greatness, as well as their other possessions in life. O Mother, always be pleased with us and grant us welfare and prosperity. I think she disappears. So she gives them all that and then she disappears. So that was very beautiful that she offers them a boon on top of everything else. And their boon is that whenever we remember you, you'll reappear. So that's the story of his sorrow. So are there any questions or comments or special learnings?
I'm getting white.
So last week we were talking about this wine cup and how Swamiji defines it is it's the cup of ambrosia that comes from all of our devotion. So the more devotion, it empowers, it makes the Divine Mother more lively in our lives and in the whole world. So that's the beauty of our practices and devotion. So that's when they talk about her gulping more and more of the wine. It's not regular wine, it's Amrit. And I think another part that was interesting to me is how Maheswara always was changing forms. And to think about us, we all have different forms that we, maybe we're a little fed up with things. So we decide to, we change our form. We go from being the person at home to, what we look at and act like at work. And then maybe when we're out with our friends, a different form. So it's just good for us to consider the many forms that we take on, which is okay unless we attach ourselves to it. I am this lovely woman that everybody enjoys when I go to the party. or I am the person who, brings light to this office. So it's all the time when we get attached to the eyes. And so that's, I think, one of the things he's pointing out is how many times we change form in a day, from mom to, to wife, to friend, to worker, whatever it might be. So. And probably a very good, some very good things in there for these times when, we're feeling a little bit uncertain about the future of the world, that we can, we know that we have the Divine Mother to turn to.
I love that she always comes to the rescue and she always defeats evil. I needed to hear that again today.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't seem that way.
Well, and also, in these stories, the time, I think I pointed out last week when they were talking about for 1,000 years, the Devas were hiding in caves and out in the jungle. And then finally they got it together to, get help from the Divine Mother. So time is sometimes, and it's also one of her weapons. So I love that he has these different weapons and they all signify something. So sometimes we just have to be a little patient, but trusting and knowing that if we keep doing our practices and encourage other people as well, that the Divine Mother will be there for us. Come to our rescue. Anything else?
Good points.
Yeah, good for us to remember all the time, whether it's, because in a sense, we're always going through little wars in our minds. And so.
Yeah, I often think about that, but then I have this negative thought like, but it may not be in our lifetime, because they go through thousands of years. So.
Right. And those are times, we've read also in here, in times when human beings were much more, everything was much bigger, that this is a dwarfed time during the Kali Yuga when we have very short lives. Our intellect is not great. We can't remember, we can't put into memory this whole book or the big 1,300 page book like they could in those days. So it is the Kali Yuga. But knowing that if you're sattvic and doing the best you can through the Kali Yuga, more than likely you'll come back in a much kinder time. That continuum is helpful for me to know we're all going to be back together. We may not look like this, but we will be here doing something together, serving in the world. So, is that helpful, Elaine?
Yeah. Yeah, we have to put it in perspective.
Right. And for us, a day in the life of the divine, because we've also read stories about that, like when Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva went to the Mani Dwepa. And they were just there and, turned into women and adoring, and loving, seeing the Divine Mother and all the beauty. And then it ended and it happened to be 100 years, just like that. So it's different.
Yeah.
Time is different. So here we are.
It's definitely helpful though to hear the stories. It helps me. It helps take me away from what's going on in my little mind and life.
Yeah, it just gives us a bigger opening and more awareness, and like you said, more hope too.
Yeah.
Hopefully more instigation to keep our practice going and not, that's
Mhm.
not the thing. Watching too much news, we can get stuck in that. Versus just knowing enough, we know who to pray for, we know what actions we might be able to take. But otherwise, like Baba says, it's your love and devotion and Om Namah Shivayas and prayers that will bring you through these things. So
Yeah.
There's a bigger plan out there and we don't know.
Yeah.
We have to do our little part.
exactly. Yeah.
In trust, it's all perfect. I mean, it's all in the bigger picture, it's all perfect.
Yeah.
We get caught up in the drama of it. That's not to get caught up in the drama is the big challenge.
Yeah, the helplessness, the feeling of helplessness. But when we think about it, we're not in control of our lives. So
Right.
we just think we are.
We just have to be constantly reminded too. I mean, to remind ourselves, it's because we do get caught up in the drama of it and we get scared. And
Yeah.
mother's always there. Mother's always there. We're the ones that forget.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And it's really our practice that's going to help us through. And that's what Baba said over and over again when he talked about the Kranti. And the only thing that's going to help you out is your practice or your devotion, your love, your Om Namah Shivaya. So here we are helping. Also, yeah, one of the other tools is coming together like this and reminding one another, because we do forget when we look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. It's really special to be able to come together. I feel really emotional. Come together and support each other.
Mhm.
And this feeling of helplessness, no, we're not capable perhaps of flying over to help the people or feed the people. I mean, it's like any, catastrophe that happens, floods, earthquakes, mostly at this point in our age, we're not able to take a relief flight and feed the people and bring them water, but we're always able to pray.
Yeah.
And that's really a good thing. And obviously you do what you can do. There might be donation things and things like that, but the prayer is there. And I think by these stories, we also see that it is not a small thing.
Mhm.
Through their prayers, they bring the Divine Mother to help the situation. And through their prayers and devotion, they even help her in the war against the huge, great buffalo. So we'll all keep praying now. Anything else? Sylvie, did you want to say anything or you're good?
Taking it all in and I'm
Okay.
glad that I'm reminded of this over and over because, I start straying again and
Sure.
brings me back to where I should be.
When I read these books, they really help me, or many books that I have around my room.
Right.
Okay, well, love to you all.